People know Elvis Presley gave away cars. That part is true. He gave away hundreds of them. Pink Cadillacs, Stutz Blackhawks, you name it. He saw a bank teller admiring his car one day. He walked back inside and gave her the keys. Just like that. That story is verified. He bought houses for friends, family, and sometimes total strangers. He paid for hospital bills. He donated to dozens of charities, often quietly, without his name attached. His generosity was a core part of who he was. His father, Vernon, was constantly worried he would give away the entire fortune. But where does the truth stop? And where does the legend begin? Elvis was a man who became a myth in his own lifetime. The stories grew around him like ivy on the walls of Graceland. The bigger he got, the wilder the stories became. And many of them were about his impulsive, almost reckless generosity. Tales of him handing out fortunes on a whim, changing lives with a single gesture. Most of these stories are impossible to prove. They exist in the memories of old friends, in whispers from his entourage, in the pages of sensational magazines from the 1970s. They have no paper trail. No named recipients who came forward. They sound too wild to be true. Are they just tall tales? Or are they glimpses into the heart of a man who had everything and just wanted to share it? A man so isolated by fame that the only way he could connect with people was by giving them things. You know, these stories aren't just about money or cars. They're about a kind of modern day folklore. They paint a picture of a king who would walk among his people and for a moment make them royalty too. We're going to look at some of these unverified legends. We won't try to prove them right or wrong. We'll just tell the story, look at the edges where fact and fiction might meet, and ask the questions that still hang in the air decades after the music stopped. Number 16, did he really pay a pilot to fly a sick child's teddy bear home? The story goes something like this. Elvis was in Las Vegas, likely sometime in the early 1970s during one of his long residency stints at the International Hotel. He was in his penthouse suite, the one that took up the entire 30th floor. He got a call, or a letter was passed to him, about a young fan. The fan was a little girl, no older than 7 or 8, who was terminally ill in a hospital, maybe in Memphis or somewhere else far away. She was a huge Elvis fan. Her most prized possession was a teddy bear that she took everywhere. On a recent trip, the family had been in Vegas and had somehow lost the bear. The little girl was heartbroken. She wasn't just sad about the bear. She believed it had a kind of magic that it helped her feel better. According to the legend, Elvis was deeply moved. He told his staff to find the bear. The Memphis Mafia guys like Joe Esposito or Jerry Schilling were used to strange requests, but this was a new one. They scoured the hotels lost and found. They called other hotels. Miraculously, they found it. A maid had turned it in. It was just a worn brown teddy bear, but now there was a problem. How to get it back to the little girl fast? She was fading, and her parents said she kept asking for it. Elvis didn't want to just mail it. That was too slow, too impersonal. So he supposedly chartered a private jet. Not for a person, just for the teddy bear. He had one of his guys, a trusted friend, act as the bear's personal escort. The pilot was instructed to fly directly to the city where the girl was, and the bear was delivered to her hospital room that same day. The story ends with the little girl getting her bear back and smiling for the first time in weeks. This story has all the hallmarks of an Elvis myth. It's emotionally potent and centers on a child, a known soft spot for him. We know Elvis had access to private jets. He leased them constantly and eventually bought his own, the Lisa Marie, in 1975. The cost of chartering a private jet in the early 70s, even for a relatively short flight from Las Vegas to Memphis, would have been several $1,000s, maybe as much as $5,000 or more, which is like $30,000 today. You know, it was a huge sum of money for a teddy bear's taxi ride. But for Elvis, whose income at the time was astronomical, it was a drop in the bucket. For books like Peter Guralnick's definitive 2-part biography, Last Train to Memphis and Careless Love, document his spending habits in detail. He could spend $100,000 in a single afternoon on cars for his friends. So the cost isn't the unbelievable part. The unbelievable part is the sheer theatricality of it. The story has never been confirmed. No one from Elvis's inner circle has ever spoken about this specific event on the record. The family of the little girl has never been identified. There are no flight records, no named pilot, no hospital name. It exists only as a piece of folklore passed down among fans. It's possible it's an exaggeration of a simpler truth. Maybe he heard the story and had one of his guys buy a new identical bear and had it messengered to the hospital. Or maybe he just sent money. But the image of a private jet soaring through the clouds with a single small passenger in a seat is so much more powerful. It speaks to a level of generosity that borders on the absurd, a kind of royal gesture from the king of rock and roll. What does it mean that we want this story to be true? Does the lack of any evidence make it less valuable? Or does its power lie purely in the sentiment it represents? If he didn't do it, who created this specific detailed legend and why a teddy bear on a plane? And the most unsettling question, if the story is true, did the little girl and her family ever know the incredible lengths he went to? Or did the bear just magically reappear at secret journey forever unknown? Number 15, did he tip a waitress with a new house? This is one of the most persistent rumors, and it has a few different versions. The most common one takes place late at night in a diner, probably somewhere in or around Memphis. Elvis and a few of his guys had been out, maybe driving around, and decided to stop for a coffee and a piece of pie. It was the kind of place that was open 24 hours, fluorescent lights humming over vinyl booths. Their waitress was an older woman, tired, her feet clearly hurting. She was polite and efficient, but had a sadness about her. Elvis, being Elvis, started talking to her. He had a way of getting people to open up. He asked her how she was doing, and she told him her story. She was a widow, or maybe her husband was sick. She was working double shifts to make ends meet, and she was on the verge of losing her house. The bank was going to foreclose in a matter of days. She was just a few $1,000s short and had no way to get it. Elvis listened quietly. He finished his coffee. As he and his friends got up to leave, he put his arm around the woman. He told her not to worry. Then he asked for the owner of the diner. On a napkin, he supposedly wrote a note. It was a promise. He told the owner to give the note to the waitress. The note said that she should go to a specific Cadillac dealership the next morning and speak to the manager, and that she should take the next day off. The woman was confused but thanked him. The next morning, she went to the dealership, note in hand. The manager was expecting her. He told her that Mr. Presley had called. He had not only bought her a new Cadillac, but he had also arranged to pay off her mortgage entirely. The story says he paid the bank directly that morning, saving her home just in time. She left with the keys to a new car and a deed to a house she now owned free and clear. This story is a classic for a reason. It combines two of Elvis's favorite gifts, cars and houses. We know for a fact that he did both many times. The story of him giving a car to the bank teller, many person, in 1975 is well documented. He also bought a house for his maid, Mary Jenkins, and for his karate instructor, Ed Parker's mother. So the act itself is completely in character. The context is also plausible. Elvis was a notorious insomniac. He loved to drive around Memphis at night, renting out movie theaters or amusement parks after hours. A late-night stop at a diner is easy to imagine. The financial details also track. In the mid-70s, a few $1,000s could certainly be the difference in a foreclosure on a modest home in Memphis. For Elvis, it was pocket change. But again, the paper trail is non-existent. No waitress has ever come forward to claim this story as her own. No diner has ever put up a plaque saying, "Elvis saved our waitress's house here." Biographers like Alana Nash, who wrote Elvis and the Memphis Mafia, have collected countless stories from his inner circle, but this one remains in the realm of hearsay. It's possible the waitress wished to remain anonymous, or maybe the story is a composite, a blend of different acts of kindness that have merged into one perfect cinematic tale. Perhaps he gave a big cash tip to a waitress who told him a sad story, and over the years the cash tip morphed into a paid-off mortgage and a new car. It's how legends are built. A seed of truth sprouts into a much larger tree. Why has this specific story in this specific setting endured for so long without any proof? Is it because the diner represents a place of ordinary working-class life, making Elvis's intervention feel like a visit from a god? If the woman and her family are out there, why have they never shared their incredible luck? And if he did this once, is it possible he did it multiple times, leaving a trail of anonymously saved homes across the South? Number 14, did he buy an entire movie theater's worth of tickets so a group of kids could see a film for free? This story usually places Elvis in his post-army, early 1960s Hollywood phase. He was making 3 movies a year, living part-time in Los Angeles. He was rich, famous, but also increasingly isolated. One afternoon, he was driving around and passed a local movie theater. There was a long line of kids outside, mostly from a poorer neighborhood. They were all excited to see the new Disney movie, or maybe a big Western. As Elvis watched from his car, he saw the theater manager come out and change the sign to Soldoyut. The disappointment on the kids' faces was immediate. Some of them had been waiting for hours. Elvis, who grew up in poverty in Tupelo and Memphis, apparently felt a pang of recognition. He reportedly told his driver to stop. He got out and walked over to the theater manager. The manager, stunned to see Elvis Presley on his doorstep, didn't know what to say. Well, Elvis asked how many seats were in the theater. Let's say the manager said 400. Elvis then pulled out a roll of cash from his pocket. He always carried huge amounts of cash. He asked the price of a ticket, then he did the math and peeled off enough bills to buy every single seat for the next showing. He told the manager to let all the kids who were waiting outside in for free. Not just them, but any other kids from the neighborhood who wanted to come. He also supposedly bought everyone popcorn and a soda. He didn't stick around for thanks. He just got back in his car and drove away, leaving behind a theater full of cheering children and a bewildered manager. This act fits perfectly with what we know about Elvis's relationship with his fans and his memories of his own childhood. He donated tens of thousands of dollars to children's charities. At Christmas, he would famously give massive checks to dozens of Memphis charities. He had a special affinity for kids. The idea of him performing a grand gesture to combat the simple disappointment of a Soldoyut sign feels right. The financial aspect is trivial. A few $100s in the early 60s would have easily covered the cost. And his habit of renting out entire venues for himself and his friends is well documented. He regularly rented the Memphian movie theater in Memphis after hours so he could watch films in private. The logic of renting a theater was already part of his life. Doing it for a group of strangers' kids is a very small leap. The story is told in various fan biographies and online forums, but like many others, it lacks specific details. What was the name of the theater? What was the movie? What was the date? No one seems to know. Without these verifiable facts, it remains a myth. It's a story that highlights the loneliness of his fame. He could buy the whole theater, but he couldn't just go sit with the kids and watch the movie himself. His very presence would have caused a riot, so he had to perform his act of kindness from a distance like a benevolent, invisible force. This story could be a romanticized version of his known habit of renting the Memphian. Maybe one night he let some of the theater staff's kids in to watch with him, and the tale grew from there. What does this story say about the prison of fame, where the only way to participate in normal life is to buy it and give it away to others? If it happened, how many of those kids grew up and told the story of the day a mysterious stranger bought out the movie theater, never knowing it was Elvis? And could there be a former theater manager out there, now an old man, who still remembers the day the king of rock and roll paid for a matinee in cash on his sidewalk? Number 13, did he anonymously fund an entire animal shelter for a year? Elvis loved animals. This is a well-known fact. He had dogs, horses, birds, and even a chimpanzee named Scatter. His love for animals was genuine and deep. The story of his generosity extends to them as well. According to this legend, sometime in the late 1960s, a small local animal shelter in Mississippi was on the brink of collapse. It was a no-kill shelter run by a small group of dedicated volunteers, but they had run out of money. They were days away from having to close their doors and send the animals to a pound where many would be euthanized. They had run a small article in a local paper, a last-ditch plea for donations. Somehow Elvis saw the article, or maybe someone on his staff saw it and brought it to his attention. He was known for reading multiple newspapers a day. The plight of the animals reportedly struck a chord with him. But he didn't want the publicity that would come with a big donation from Elvis Presley. He felt it would detract from the cause and turn it into a media circus, so he decided to act in secret. He had one of his most trusted aides, perhaps his friend Alan Fortas, handle the entire transaction. Fortas was tasked with delivering a briefcase full of cash to the shelter. The amount was said to be enough to fund their entire operating budget, a food, medicine, rent, utilities billed for a full year. The instructions were clear. The donation was to be completely anonymous. The shelter director was just told it came from a friend of the animals. The shelter was saved, The volunteers were overjoyed, believing a miracle had occurred. They never knew the source of the funds. Elvis supposedly followed their progress from a distance, pleased that he could help without his fame getting in the way. This story is particularly hard to verify because its entire premise is secrecy. Elvis was successful in remaining anonymous, then by definition, there would be no record of his involvement. What lends it credibility is his documented love for animals and his known instances of anonymous charity. He often had Vernon Presley or other members of his staff write checks to charities from accounts not directly linked to his name. He understood the power of his celebrity and sometimes chose not to use it. In 1967, Elvis bought a 163-acre ranch in Mississippi, the Circle G. He filled it with horses. This shows he was actively investing in animals and land in Mississippi around the time this story is said to have taken place. A donation of, say, $15,000 or $20,000, a massive sum for a small shelter, then would have been a minor expense for him. The story also aligns with his spiritual searching during this period. After his 1968 comeback, he became more introspective, reading books on religion and philosophy. An act of pure, selfless charity fits with the mindset he was trying to cultivate. Yet, no shelter in Mississippi has this miraculous anonymous donation as part of its official history. The story persists in the ether of Elvis lore, a testament to his compassion. Is it possible that a successful act of anonymous charity is the hardest kind to ever prove true, leaving it forever in the realm of myth? Could there be records in the Presley archives at Gracelandia memo from Vernon, a receipt for a large cash withdrawal that could one day shed light on this? Or is the story more valuable as a parable about quiet compassion, regardless of whether a briefcase of cash ever really changed hands? Number 12, did he really buy a bank to save a town's mortgages? This is perhaps one of the most audacious stories of Elvis's generosity, scaling his known habit of paying off a single mortgage to an almost unbelievable level. The legend says there was a small town, maybe in rural Tennessee or Mississippi, where many of Elvis's distant relatives and old family friends lived. The town's economy was failing, and the local bank, which held the mortgages for most of the homes and farms, was about to be acquired by a ruthless out-of-state corporation. The new owners planned to immediately foreclose on all overdue accounts, which would have displaced dozens of families. Panic was setting in. Someone who knew Elvis got word to him, explaining the dire situation. Elvis's response in this telling was not just to pay off a few debts. He saw a systemic problem and devised a systemic solution. He went to the town, he met with the bank president. He asked what it would cost to buy the entire bank, the building, the assets, the loan portfolios, everything. A price was named, a figure in the hundreds of thousands, or maybe even over $1 million. Without blinking, Elvis agreed. He had Vernon Presley arrange the funds. Within days, Elvis Presley was the owner of a small-town bank. His first act as owner was to call a town meeting. He announced that he was restructuring the loans. For those in deep trouble, he supposedly forgave their debt entirely. For others, he lowered the interest rates to almost nothing. He effectively saved the town's economy and the homes of everyone he knew there. Then, once the crisis was averted, he supposedly sold the bank to a responsible local community group for a single dollar. This story elevates Elvis from a generous celebrity to a full-blown folk hero, a financial savior in a white jumpsuit. The scale is what makes it so wild. Buying a car is one thing. Buying a federally regulated financial institution is another entirely. The legal and logistical hurdles would have been immense. Such a transaction would have generated a mountain of paperwork, requiring state and federal approval. It's almost impossible that a secret like that could have been kept. Someone, a bank teller, a lawyer, a federal regulator would have talked, and yet the story endures. The plausibility lies in its motivation. Elvis felt a deep-seated responsibility to the people from his past. He supported a vast network of family and friends. The idea that he would protect them on a mass scale is in character. His finances were certainly robust enough to support such a purchase, especially in the 1970s. An article in Forbes estimates his lifetime earnings at around $100 million before his death, equivalent to nearly $500 million today. So, the money was there. What is missing is any shred of evidence. No town has ever claimed to be the one Elvis saved. No banking records have ever surfaced. It seems to be a complete fabrication, but a powerful one. It might be an extreme exaggeration of a real event, like him co-signing a loan for a friend to start a business or helping a few families in the same town with their mortgage payments around the same time. These separate acts could have been consolidated by memory and rumor into one spectacular mythical event. Could a story of this magnitude truly have been erased from all public and private records? Is it a metaphor for his broader economic impact on the Memphis area, where his presence created jobs and opportunities for many? Or does the story reveal more about our own fantasies of being rescued from financial ruin by a benevolent, wealthy hero who can literally buy the bank? Or number 11, did he give his jeweler a blank check for Christmas? Elvis's love for extravagant jewelry is legendary. The big rings, the gold chains, the diamond-encrusted Maltese cross necklaces, they were as much a part of his image as the sideburns. His primary jeweler in Memphis was a man named Lowell Hayes. Elvis spent a fortune with Hayes, not just on himself, but on gifts for everyone around him. If you were in Elvis's inner circle, you had a piece of jewelry from him. The famous TCB taking care of business necklaces were all made by Lowell Hayes. Their relationship was one of business, but also friendship. The story goes that one Christmas, probably in the mid-1970s, Elvis was feeling particularly grateful and generous. He called Lowell Hayes to his Graceland home. He thanked him for all his hard work, for the beautiful designs, and for his friendship. Then he pulled out his checkbook, he signed his name, E.A. Presley, and handed the blank check to the jeweler. He told him, "Lowell, fill this in for whatever you think is fair for all you've done for me. Have a great Christmas." He then walked out of the room, leaving a stunned Lowell Hayes holding a signed blank check from one of the richest entertainers in the world. The check was essentially a license to print money. Hayes could have written in any number he wanted, $50,000, $100,000, $1,000,000. Elvis's account could have covered it. The story highlights Elvis's immense trust and his almost casual disregard for the value of money. For him, the gesture was the point. The amount didn't matter. It was a test of character and a reward for loyalty all in one. According to the legend, Lowell Hayes was so touched and so honorable that he thought long and hard about it. He calculated what he might have made in profit from Elvis that year, or maybe just a reasonable Christmas bonus. He filled in a modest amount. Some versions of the story say $10,000. Others say $25,000, and cashed the check. He could have taken much more, but he didn't. When Elvis found out, he was supposedly pleased, feeling his trust had been validated. Unlike many of the other stories, this one has a named, verifiable person at its center, Lowell Hayes. Hayes is still a respected jeweler and has spoken extensively about his time with Elvis. He has confirmed many stories of Elvis's generosity, like the time Elvis commissioned more than a dozen TCB necklaces at once to give away. However, the specific story of the blank check is not one Hayes has ever officially confirmed in a major interview or biography. It seems to exist in a secondary ring of Elvis lore. It's possible it's a story he told privately that has since leaked out and been embellished. Or it could be an apocryphal tale meant to illustrate the dynamic of their relationship. The act itself feels very Elvis. He once gave his doctor, Dr. Nicopolis, a Mercedes-Benz just because the doctor admired it. A blank check is just a more abstract version of the same impulse. Is the story's survival dependent on Lowell Hayes' silence, a private moment he chooses not to publicize? Did this happen not just with Hayes, but with other trusted friends and associates, making it a regular, if unrecorded, part of his gift-giving? And what does it say about Elvis's state of mind that he would hand over such a potent symbol of his financial power with so little apparent concern? Number 10, did he pay for a stranger's entire kidney transplant? Of all the stories of Elvis's generosity, the ones involving health and medical emergencies are the most poignant. This one is particularly dramatic. The setting is usually a hospital, perhaps the Baptist Memorial in Memphis, where Elvis himself was often a patient and a benefactor. A member of his entourage was there visiting someone when they overheard a frantic conversation. The family was in the waiting room, devastated. Their loved one, sometimes told as a young mother, sometimes a father one, was suffering from kidney failure and needed an urgent transplant. They had a donor, but they didn't have the money to pay for the complex and expensive surgery. The hospital required payment or a significant deposit up front, and their insurance wouldn't cover enough of it. They were out of time and options. The friend of Elvis went back and told him the story. Elvis, who had lost his own mother, Gladys, to illness at a young age, was always deeply affected by stories of medical hardship. He reportedly told his friend to handle it immediately and discreetly. He didn't want to meet the family or get any thanks. He just wanted the problem solved. An aide was sent to the hospital's billing department. They explained that they wanted to pay for the entire cost of the kidney transplant for this specific patient. The bill was enormous, tens of thousands of dollars, even in the 1970s. The aide paid it in full with a check or cash. The hospital staff was sworn to secrecy about the donor's identity. The family was simply informed that an anonymous benefactor had covered all the costs and that the surgery could proceed. They never found out that their miracle was funded by the king of rock and roll. This story showcases a different kind of generosity, not an impulsive gift of a luxury item, but a life-saving intervention. It's a plausible story. Elvis was known to help people with medical bills. He was a major donor to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis, founded by his friend Danny Thomas. His own health was a constant concern, so he was very familiar with the world of hospitals and medical care. The cost, while high for an ordinary person, was manageable for him. The key element is the anonymity. Like the animal shelter story, it's a tale of pure altruism, unmotivated by a desire for publicity. However, just like the other stories, it remains unverified. No family has ever come forward. No hospital has ever broken its confidentiality to confirm the tale. Medical privacy laws would, of course, make it difficult to ever prove. The story could have its roots in a smaller true event. Elvis's longtime cook and maid, Mary Jenkins, recalled in her book, Elvis, Memories Beyond Graceland, how he paid for her mother's extended stay in a nursing home. He took care of the people close to him. It's conceivable he extended that care to a stranger. But a full, anonymous transplant payment is a grander, more mythic version of that charity. It's the difference between helping your family and acting like an angel for a stranger. If he did this, was it a one-time act, or did he have a quiet system for finding and helping people in medical crisis? How many other lives might have been saved or changed by a secret phone call from Graceland to a hospital billing office? And what does it say about a healthcare system where a person's life could depend on the random, charitable impulse of a passing celebrity? Number 9, did he buy a fleet of bicycles for an entire orphanage? This is a warmer, more lighthearted story, but it follows the same pattern of impulsive, large-scale giving. The story says that Elvis was driving past an orphanage or a children's home in Memphis. He saw the kids playing outside in the yard. It was a sunny day, but he noticed they didn't have many toys. The playground was sparse. What struck him most was that he didn't see a single bicycle. It reminded him of his own childhood, where a bicycle was the ultimate object of desire, a symbol of freedom he couldn't afford for a long time. He decided on the spot to fix the problem. He didn't just send a check. He went straight to the biggest toy store or bicycle shop in Memphis. He walked in and told the owner he wanted to buy a bicycle for every single child in that orphanage. He didn't know how many there were. He told the owner to call the orphanage, get the number of kids and their approximate ages, and then deliver a brand new bike, sized for each child, to them that very afternoon. He paid for the whole lot in cash, right there on the counter. He might have even bought helmets and horns for all of them, too. Later that day, a truck or a series of trucks pulled up to the orphanage, loaded with dozens and dozens of shiny new bicycles, a surprise gift from a secret Santa in a Cadillac. This story is deeply in character. Elvis loved to buy toys, both for Lisa Marie and for the children of his friends. He famously rented out the entire Libertyland amusement park in Memphis on multiple occasions, just so he and his small group of friends and their kids could ride the roller coasters all night without being bothered. The joy of children was something he was willing to spend a lot of money to create. The image of him buying a whole store's worth of bikes is easy to believe. In the 1960s or 70s, you could probably buy 50 or 60 bikes for a few $1,000s, an amount he wouldn't have thought twice about. Yet, the story lacks a name. Which orphanage? Which bike shop? The details are fuzzy, which is a red flag for a myth. It's possible it's based on his well-documented and very public charity work. Every Christmas, Elvis gave a large check to the Memphis Press Scimitar's Goodfellows charity, which provided food and toys to poor families. He was a very public supporter of charities for disabled and underprivileged children. The story of the bicycles might be a more hands-on, romanticized version of his annual check writing. It turns a distant financial donation into a direct personal act of joy giving. People would rather imagine him in the bike shop than imagining his accountant signing a check. Why does this particular image, a mountain of brand new bicycles, capture the imagination so effectively? Is it because the bicycle is such a potent symbol of a happy, carefree childhood? If the story isn't true, how did it start? Did a bike shop owner once tell a friend that Elvis came in and bought 5 bikes for his cousins, and, the story grew with each retelling? And could there be a whole generation of Memphis orphans who received a mysterious new bike one day and never knew who sent it? The number 8, did he give away a diamond ring to a Las Vegas showgirl he just met? Elvis in Las Vegas was a spectacle of excess. The shows, the lifestyle, the spending, everything was bigger. This story fits right into that world. After one of his sold-out shows at the International Hotel, Elvis was backstage unwinding with his crew. A group of the show's backup singers or dancers, the showgirls, came in to say hello and congratulate him. They were all beautiful, dressed in their elaborate costumes. Elvis was charming, talking, and laughing with all of them. He noticed one young woman in particular. She was new, a bit shy, and seemed overwhelmed by it all. He struck up a conversation with her. She happened to admire one of the enormous diamond rings he was wearing. He had many, often one on every finger. She might have said something like, "That's the most beautiful ring I've ever seen." Without a moment's hesitation, Elvis slipped the ring off his finger. It was likely a huge cluster of diamonds worth tens of thousands of dollars. He took her hand and put the ring on her finger. He told her, "Honey, it's yours. It looks better on you anyway." The young woman was speechless. She tried to give it back, thinking he was joking. But he was completely serious. He insisted she keep it. He had just met her minutes before, and he gave her a piece of jewelry that was worth more than she would make in a year. For Elvis, it was a simple, impulsive act of admiration. For her, it was a life-changing gift. This story is one of the most frequently told Vegas myths. It is entirely plausible. Where Elvis gave away jewelry constantly, his friend and bodyguard, Sonny West, told stories of how Elvis would give away rings, watches, and necklaces to friends, staff, and even fans he met briefly. Giving gifts was his way of expressing affection and maintaining a connection. In the high-stakes, surreal environment of his Las Vegas penthouse, normal rules didn't apply. Money had a different meaning. A $30,000 ring could be given away as easily as someone else might buy a friend a drink. His girlfriend at the time, Linda Thompson, has recounted how he would go on shopping sprees at jewelry stores, buying things not for himself, but specifically to give away later. The problem with this story is that it's generic. There are dozens of variations, but no specific showgirl has ever come forward with the ring and the story to back it up. Perhaps she was afraid of the publicity, or she sold the ring immediately for the cash. It's also possible that this is a composite story. He likely gave jewelry to many women he worked with in Las Vegas over the years. This legend might be the result of all those separate events being combined into one perfect, dramatic, backstage moment. It's the idealized version of his Vegas generosity. Peter Harry Brown and Pat H. Broeski, in their book Down at the End of Lonely Street, The Life and Death of Elvis Presley, detail the almost manic spending of the Vegas years, fueled by prescription drugs and the pressure of performance. In that context, giving away a diamond ring to a near stranger seems not just possible, but probable. If this happened multiple times, how many incredible pieces of Elvis's personal jewelry are now sitting in anonymous jewelry boxes across the country? Did he ever regret these impulsive gifts the next day, or was the act of giving the only thing that mattered to him? And what was it like for the young woman trying to explain to her friends and family how she came to own a rock star's diamond ring after a 5-minute conversation? Number 7, did he secretly pay the college tuition for a talented young musician? Beyond material goods, some stories credit Elvis with investing in people's futures. This legend concerns a young aspiring musician in Memphis. This young man was incredibly talented and rested, a gifted singer or guitar player, but came from a poor family and had no money for college or formal music education. He was working a dead-end job to support his family, his dreams of a music career fading. Elvis heard about him through the grapevine. Maybe one of his own session musicians like James Burton or Ronnie Tutt had seen the kid play in a local bar and mentioned him to Elvis. And Elvis, who never had the chance for a formal education himself, and was famously self-taught, was intrigued. He asked to hear more about the young man. Convinced of his talent and drive, Elvis decided to help, but again, he wanted to do it anonymously. He didn't want the kid to feel indebted to him or for his career to be forever overshadowed by the patronage of Elvis Presley. He wanted him to succeed on his own terms, so he had one of his financial managers set up a trust or a scholarship fund. The fund was designed to pay for the young musician's entire four-year tuition at a prestigious music school like Berklee College of Music or Juilliard. The money was routed through a law firm or a foundation, so its source was untraceable. The young man was simply notified that he had been awarded a full scholarship from an anonymous benefactor. He went to college, honed his craft, and went on to have a successful, though not necessarily famous, career in music, never knowing who his secret patron was. This story is powerful because it's not about charity, it's about empowerment. It shows Elvis using his wealth to give someone else the opportunities he never had. It's a plausible motive. Elvis was known to be generous to other musicians. He helped launch the careers of people like songwriter Mac Davis by recording their songs. He championed the voices of singers he admired, like Roy Hamilton. The idea of him taking this one step further and funding an education is a logical extension of that support. The mechanism of anonymity is also consistent with other legends. He had the financial infrastructure, through his father Vernon and his team of managers, to arrange such a thing without his name ever appearing on a document. But there is no proof. No musician has ever publicly stated they believe Elvis was their secret benefactor. The world of music scholarships is vast, and a single anonymous one would be a needle in a haystack. This legend may be a form of wishful thinking among musicians and fans of the dream of having your talent recognized and nurtured by the greatest artist of them all. It's a story that reinforces Elvis's status as not just a performer, but a true patron of the arts. It's possible the story is a heavily altered version of a simpler truth. Maybe Elvis paid for a few guitar lessons for a friend's son, or bought a new instrument for a promising young player, and the legend of a full college scholarship grew from that seed. If this story is true, does that musician ever wonder about the identity of the person who changed his life? Did Elvis ever follow his career from a distance, taking quiet satisfaction in his success? And could there be other professionals, doctors, lawyers, artists, whose education was secretly funded by Elvis, their lives built on a foundation of his hidden generosity? Number 6, did he buy a stranger a new car because he liked his story? This story is a variation on the classic Elvis gives away a car theme, but with a unique twist. It didn't happen at a dealership or a bank, it happened on the side of a road. According to the legend, Elvis was out for a drive one day when he saw a man stranded with a broken down car. The car was old, beat up, and smoke was pouring from the engine. Elvis, who loved cars and knew a bit about them, pulled over to see if he could help. The man was a traveling salesman, or maybe a working man trying to get to his job, and he was in despair. This car was his livelihood, and he had no money to replace it. Elvis and the man got to talking. Elvis asked him about his life, his family, his job. The man told Elvis a story of hard work, bad luck, and trying to provide for his family. Elvis was apparently so taken by the man's dignity and perseverance that he decided to do more than just call a tow truck. He told the man to leave the old car right where it was. He drove him into town to the nearest car dealership. He walked in and told the man to pick out any car he wanted on the lot. The man, who may or may not have recognized Elvis at this point, was in shock. He picked out a sensible, new family car, a Ford or a Chevrolet. Elvis paid for it in cash and handed the keys to the complete stranger. He had turned a man's worst day into the best day of his life, all because he was moved by his story during a chance encounter on a highway. This story feels like a modern-day parable, like the story of the Good Samaritan, but with a Cadillac. The core elements are all there: the chance encounter, the empathy for a stranger's plight, and the immediate over-the-top solution. We know Elvis gave away cars. The sheer number is estimated to be over 200. Most of these were to friends, family, and employees. A few, like the one for the bank teller, were to strangers he met in formal settings. The idea of him doing it for a man on the side of the road is what makes this version so wild and romantic. It suggests a world where help could literally appear out of nowhere at your moment of greatest need. As with the others, there is no verification. No man has ever come forward as the recipient of this roadside miracle. There are no dealership records. It exists as a friend of a friend story. It's possible that someone once saw Elvis pulled over helping a motorist, and the rest of the story was invented to explain why he was there. Or maybe he gave the man $100 bill to help with repairs, and the story escalated over time. In his book, Me and a Guy Named Elvis, Jerry Schilling, a close friend, describes Elvis's almost childlike view of the world and his impulsive nature. If he saw a problem he could fix with money, he often would, without thinking about the consequences. Stopping on the side of the road to buy a stranger a car fits that psychological profile perfectly. Why is the side of the road setting so important to this legend? Does it represent the randomness of fortune, both good and bad? If this did happen, what was the car dealer's reaction when Elvis Presley walked in with a dusty stranger and bought a car with a wad of cash from his pocket? And how did the man explain his brand new car to his wife when he finally got home? Number 5, did he rip a diamond off his cape and give it to a fan in the front row? This is a pure Las Vegas legend born from the spectacle of his 1970s concerts. During this era, Elvis performed in elaborate, custom-made jumpsuits. Many of these were adorned with intricate patterns of studs, stones, and even real jewels. The most famous ones had matching capes, which he would spread wide at the climax of a song for dramatic effect. The story goes that during one of these shows, in the middle of a powerful ballad, Elvis was standing at the edge of the stage. He made eye contact with a woman in the very front row. She was crying, completely overcome with emotion by his performance. And Elvis was so moved by her reaction that he wanted to give her something. He was holding his cape, a magnificent garment weighing dozens of pounds. He supposedly reached down to the hem of the cape, where a large, genuine diamond was sewn into the design. With a quick, strong tug, he ripped the diamond DC and a piece of the cape's fabric with it right off the garment. He leaned down and pressed it into the woman's hand. He then carried on with the show as if nothing had happened, with a visible tear in his famous cape. The woman was left holding a real diamond, a piece of his costume, and an unbelievable story. This is a story about pure showmanship and impulse. The visual is incredible. A superstar, in the middle of a performance, literally tearing apart his iconic costume to give a piece of it to a fan. It's the ultimate concert souvenir. We know for a fact that his jumpsuits were incredibly expensive. The Aloha from Hawaii suit, for example, cost $65,000 to make in 1973. While most of the decorations were studs and rhinestones, it's conceivable that some custom pieces, especially for a Vegas run, might have included real precious stones for extra sparkle under the lights. His costume designer, Bill Belu, created some of the most famous outfits in music history. The idea of Elvis defacing one on a whim is shocking, but there's no evidence it ever happened. No fan has ever produced a diamond still attached to a piece of a white jumpsuit. None of his band members or backup singers have ever recounted seeing him do this. The logistics are also questionable. Ripping a well-sewn diamond off a reinforced cape would be incredibly difficult, especially with one hand during a song. It's more likely that this story is a dramatic interpretation of his known habit of giving away scarves. During his shows, he would wipe his brow with silk scarves and then toss them into the crowd. He gave away thousands of them. A fan might have told her friends, "He gave me his scarf. It was like he was giving me a piece of his soul." Over time, the humble scarf could have transformed into a mythical ripped-off diamond. It makes the story more valuable, more Vegas. What does this legend say about, the connection between a performer and their audience and the desire for a physical token of that connection? If the story is purely symbolic, what does the act of tearing the cape represent? And is it possible that a woman somewhere still has a small, unmounted diamond that she can't prove came from Elvis, a secret treasure from a single moment at the foot of a stage? Number 4, did he keep an unknown songwriter on a secret retainer for years? Elvis's success was built on songs. He didn't write his own music, so he was completely dependent on the work of songwriters. He and his team, led by music publisher Freddie Bienstock of Hill and Range, were constantly searching for the next hit. This story is about a different kind of relationship with a writer. The legend says there was a songwriter, a talented but struggling artist in Nashville or Memphis, whose style Elvis deeply admired. The writer's songs were poetic and soulful, but not very commercial. They weren't the kind of pop hits Colonel Tom Parker was looking for. But Elvis connected with them on a personal level. He wanted to support the writer, but he knew the Colonel would never approve of paying for songs they couldn't use. And he didn't want to insult the writer with what might seem like charity. So he arranged a secret deal. He had one of his companies put the songwriter on a retainer. The writer was paid a steady, monthly salary enough to live on comfortably and focus on his art. In return, all he had to do was send his new songs to Elvis first. Elvis had the right of first refusal. The thing is, he almost never recorded any of them. He just wanted to read the lyrics and hear the demos. It was like he was a private patron for an artist he believed in, funding his work for his own private enjoyment. This arrangement supposedly went on for years, a secret between Elvis and the songwriter, a quiet partnership completely outside the mainstream music business. This is a fascinating story because it's about a deep, artistic appreciation. It paints Elvis not just as a singer, but as a connoisseur of songwriting. The idea is plausible. Elvis was often frustrated with the poor quality of the movie soundtrack songs he was forced to record in the 1960s. He craved meaningful material as his 1968 comeback and his later recordings of gospel and soul songs proved. Finding a writer whose work spoke to him and supporting him secretly would have been a way to stay connected to the kind of music he loved. The financial arrangement would have been easy to hide within the complex Presley business empire. A few $100s a month to an unknown writer would have been a rounding error in the books. But like the other myths, there's no name attached. No songwriter has ever claimed to be the recipient of this secret salary. The estate of great songwriters like Don Robertson or Mort Schumann have been studied, but no evidence of such a deal has emerged. It's possible the writer took the secret to his grave, honoring his deal with Elvis. It's also possible that the story is a romantic allegory for Elvis's relationship with all songwriters. In a way, he kept the entire Nashville songwriting community on retainer, as the hope of getting a song recorded by Elvis was enough to keep thousands of writers working and dreaming. A cut by Elvis could set a writer up for life. This story might just personalize that broad economic reality into a tale of a single, secret patronage. Is it possible that deep within the Graceland archives, there is a box of demo tapes and lyric sheets from an unknown writer, the product of this secret arrangement? Did Elvis share these private songs with his closest friends, music that the public never got to hear? And if the songwriter is still alive, why has he remained silent, even after all these years? Number 3. Did he try to buy a Memphis newspaper to fire a negative critic? Elvis was famously sensitive to criticism. He was a polite Southern boy at heart and couldn't understand why anyone would write cruel things about him. This legend takes that sensitivity to an extreme. Sometime in his later years, perhaps 1975 or 1976, when his health was declining and his performances were becoming erratic, a local critic at one of the Memphis newspapers, either the Commercial Appeal or the Press Scimitar, wrote a particularly harsh review of one of his shows. Or perhaps it was an editorial about his weight gain and reclusive lifestyle. The article was brutal, and when Elvis read it, he was deeply hurt and enraged. His first impulse wasn't to write a letter to the editor, it was to eliminate the source. He reportedly called his father, Vernon, and his manager, Colonel Parker, and told them he wanted to buy the newspaper. Not just place an ad, he wanted to purchase the entire publication, a multi-million-dollar enterprise. His plan was simple. Once he owned the paper, his first act as publisher would be to walk into the newsroom and personally fire the critic who had written the negative piece. As he was completely serious, his father and the colonel had to spend hours talking him down, explaining that you can't just buy a major metropolitan newspaper overnight, and that even if he did, it would be a public relations disaster. The story ends with Elvis reluctantly abandoning the plan, though he never forgave the critic. This story, if true, shows a darker side of his generosity, the willingness to use his immense wealth not for charity, but as a weapon. It's a tale of ego and power, and it is one of the more believable wild stories. Members of the Memphis Mafia, including his bodyguard Red West, have confirmed Elvis's explosive temper and his obsession with loyalty. He could not stand what he perceived as betrayal, and a negative review from his hometown paper would have felt like a deep betrayal. He was also capable of extreme, financially outlandish ideas. His plan to start a karate film studio, for example, was a real project that he poured a lot of money into. Buying a newspaper to fire one writer fits this pattern of thinking. While there is no public record of a formal offer to buy either Memphis paper, the story has been told by several people who were in his inner circle. It's a staple of books that focus on his later, more troubled years. It's possible it never got past the angry late-night phone call stage, but that the intent was very real. It shows the danger of a man with unlimited resources and thinning skin, a man so insulated from reality that he believed he could buy and sell public opinion. The critic, whose name is sometimes mentioned in retellings, continued to work at the paper for years, blissfully unaware of how close he may have come to being fired by the king of rock and roll. What does this story reveal about the psychological pressures of being the king and the inability to distinguish between personal slights and professional criticism? If the Colonel and Vernon hadn't stopped him, could he have actually pulled it off? And how would the history of Memphis journalism have changed if Elvis Presley had become a newspaper publisher in 1976? Number 2. Did he offer to pay for the Graceland upkeep of a complete stranger for life? This is one of the strangest and most specific legends. It's not about giving something away, it's about inviting someone in. The story says that one day, an elderly woman showed up at the gates of Graceland. She wasn't a hysterical fan. She was calm and well-dressed. She told the guards she just wanted to sit on the lawn for a while. She said the place looked peaceful. The guards, used to all sorts of strange requests, politely told her that wasn't possible. The woman was persistent, but gentle. She came back every day for a week, just sitting quietly on the public sidewalk outside the wall, looking at the house. Elvis saw her from an upstairs window. He was curious. He sent one of his guys down to talk to her. The woman explained that she was a recent widow. Her husband had just died, she was all alone, and her small house felt empty and sad. She said that looking at Graceland, with its beautiful grounds, gave her a sense of peace. She wasn't an Elvis fan in particular, she just liked the look of the place. Elvis was incredibly touched by her quiet dignity and her story of loneliness. He reportedly came down to the gate himself and spoke with her. Then he made an astonishing offer. He told her she was welcome to come inside the gates and sit on the lawn anytime she wanted. But he went further. He offered to have a small cottage or guest house built for her on the Graceland property. Yeah, he told her she could live there free of charge for the rest of her life. He would take care of all her expenses. He, a man who fiercely guarded his privacy, was so moved by a stranger's loneliness that he offered to make her his permanent neighbor. The story ends with the woman being overwhelmed and politely declining the offer. The gesture was enough. She thanked him, and after that day, she didn't return. The story illustrates a profound, almost reckless empathy. Elvis's own loneliness in the big house was a well-known secret. Perhaps in this elderly widow, he saw a reflection of his own isolation, and his impulse was to try to cure hers, and by extension, his own. The idea of him offering a piece of his sanctuary to a stranger is both beautiful and deeply sad. This story exists only in the oral tradition of Elvis lore. There is no record, no name, no confirmation from anyone in the Presley family or estate. It's possible. It's a complete fabrication, a piece of folklore designed to humanize the remote figure Graceland had become. Or it might be an incredible exaggeration of a much smaller event. Maybe he did see a woman outside the gates, sent someone to give her a glass of water, and that small act of kindness was inflated into the offer of a free house for life. It's a story that speaks to the power of Graceland itself, a place that people saw as a symbol of peace and stability, a secular shrine. What does it mean that a place of such extreme celebrity could also be seen as a place of quiet refuge? If the woman was real, what did she think of the young man who made such a wild and heartfelt offer? And does this story reveal a deep-seated desire in Elvis not just to be a star, but to be a caretaker, a patriarch, for anyone who seemed lost and in need of a home? That's number 1. Did he leave a winning lottery ticket as a tip? This final story is the ultimate myth of Elvis's casual, almost accidental generosity. It's set in the last year or two of his life. He was in a convenience store or a gas station late at night, a common occurrence for him. He was buying a few things, sodas, snacks, maybe some magazines. The person behind the counter was a young kid, working a boring dead-end job for minimum wage. Elvis, as he often did, struck up a conversation. As he was paying, he bought a lottery ticket. The lottery was a relatively new thing in many states in the mid-70s. He paid for his things and the ticket. As he was about to leave, he looked at the lottery ticket in his hand, and then he looked at the kid behind the counter. He apparently had a moment of thought. He didn't need the money. $1 million prize, the typical jackpot back then, would have been a nice bonus, but it wouldn't have changed his life. But for this kid, it would change everything. So instead of a cash tip, he slid the unsigned lottery ticket across the counter. He told the kid, "Here, this is for you. Good luck." He then walked out. The kid was left holding the ticket. The legend concludes in one of two ways. In the most dramatic version, that ticket turned out to be the grand prize winner. The kid became an instant millionaire, all thanks to a random, impulsive gift from a late-night customer he barely recognized. In a more modest version, the ticket was just a small winner, maybe for $50 or $100, but it was still a moment the cashier never forgot. This story is the perfect urban legend. It's untraceable, it has a magical quality, and it ends with a life-changing twist. It combines his known habit of late-night wanderings and his impulsive giving with the universal fantasy of winning the lottery. The act itself would have cost him only a single dollar. It's the most financially insignificant gift in any of these stories, but the one with the most explosive potential. The beauty of the story is that Elvis himself would never know the outcome. He gave away, not money, but the possibility of money. It was an act of pure detached goodwill. There is, of course, absolutely no proof this ever happened. No lottery winner from that era has ever credited their fortune to Elvis Presley. State lotteries were not even universal in the US during his lifetime. The Tennessee State Lottery, for example, didn't start until 2004. So the story would have to have taken place while he was on tour or in Vegas. It's almost certainly a complete fabrication, but it's a fabrication that reveals a deep truth about his public image. People saw him as a man for whom money was so abundant it had lost all meaning, a man who could afford to give away a winning lottery ticket because the thrill of the gesture was worth more to him than the money itself. Why has this specific myth, with no basis in geographical or historical fact, become one of the most enduring unverified stories about him? Does it represent the ultimate fantasy of his generosity, a life transformed not by a calculated gift, but by a throwaway gesture, a cosmic accident? And finally, if he could have, would he have done it?